the biggest obstacle to learning is actually the school itself. And I'm not talking about our amazing teachers or which curriculum we use or even the books on the shelf. I'm talking about this industrialized form of education that we all inherited and then mindlessly passed on to a new generation of kids. And we care so much about education, we're often asking questions about how to fix it. Should there be more math and science or more art and music? How much recess and free play should a kid have? Should we do direct instruction or discovery learning? But these don't really address the true issue. The true issue is that I think we all believe that our goal here is to create lifelong learners. And we have to address whether or not the school is actually built for that purpose. So I went out to explore that in my own experience as a teacher. I started as a youth and family counselor, working with foster children and juvenile inmates in Northeast Georgia. And then I went out to South Korea and I taught senior citizens. I taught university students in Vietnam and primary school students in East Africa. I came to the Dominican Republic and helped build a public school, and then I served world schooling families from all over the world. Young and old, rich and poor, gifted and talented, and students with special needs. And I kept coming across this one thing that to me seemed universal across all of the cultures, which is that if you're really interested in knowing if that person is becoming a lifelong learner, then they have to own their learning. And when I say own your learning, I mean you play a role in deciding what it is that you learn. You understand why you're learning it. And not only are you working on the fundamental skills that you need to learn that, but in an industrialized school system, you're allowed to work on those skills. You see, this old system, the one that we inherited, did make sense at one point. If you wanted access to information 120 years ago, then you sent your children to the one place where all of the books were stored, the schoolhouse. And as we expanded education, we took those books and we divided them by number. And we gave a different book to our teachers. I don't know if you've ever seen a teacher book, but it's a little bit bigger than the student book because it has the answers to the questions in the student book. And we told our children if they'll come and sit quietly, don't make a big fuss, raise your hand, then we will give you enough of this information year by year to make you educated. But what ultimately ended up happening is this year by year standardized structure of progress started to create labels for our children. They look around a room that is divided by a birth date, and they wonder, if I'm behind, what does it mean? Does it mean I'm not good enough to fit this society? If I am meeting it, what does that mean? Or if I'm ahead, what does that mean? And if I'm behind, well, I am not going to allow people to call me unintelligent or dumb. So our kids, these smart kids, they reject those labels. You see, instead of being called unintelligent, they'd much rather be called lazy or apathetic or sometimes rebellious or disruptive. They have a supercomputer in their pocket. No longer is this access to information limited. They know that if they want to watch any film, see any work of art, hear any lecture, or listen to any song that has ever existed, they can access it at the touch of a button. And yet they're still being told, if you're 8 years old, you need to be able to do this. If you're 12 years old, you should be able to do this. And if you're 15 years old and you can't do this, guess what? It's over for you. I want to tell you a little bit about one student. And while I've taught thousands of them, and every story is unique, this girl's story, I think, will tell the tale of what I'm trying to say. Her name was Jen. She came to me at 15 years old, and Jen was a student that had been labeled behind. And like many, she rejected that label and would much prefer to be called lazy or rebellious. So much so that in the 7th grade, when she was 13 years old, she quit school altogether and convinced her parents to let her do homeschool on a computer. But she wasn't doing it. So when she showed up to me at 15 years old, this young lady was 2 years behind this arbitrary measure of what she was supposed to be, this comparison against her friends and classmates. She thought it was over. And she came to me and thought that maybe I would be able to bring her along, to catch her up to this pace. But when I looked at the enormity of the lessons that she would have to do to catch up, and I realized that catching up just meant there would be more lessons coming right after that, I proposed a radical idea to her. You see, I had researched that in order to graduate high school, which was what her goal was, you don't actually have to go from 7th to 8th grade and all the way through. You can test out. And so I told her to quit the program. She thought I was crazy, but after a few weeks, the relief, the anxiety that she had felt with this weight of assignments was gone. And we looked at the exams, one in English and math, another in science and social studies. And we measured where she was right at that moment. And it turned out like she was pretty advanced in English, pretty close to passing that exam, and not as advanced in others. And things were going well. She came to me one day and she said, "So, when will I be able to take the exam?" And something dawned on me, because I think I realized then and there that she still thought that I was in charge of the pace of her education. She thought I was going to tell her, "You'll be able to take the exam in June or September." But I didn't tell her that. I took a look at where she was, I took a look at where she needed to be, and I said, I think it's going to take about 500 hours of focused study. Let's break out the calendar and see what that looks like. If you spend 5 or 6 hours a day, you'll be able to take the exam here, and if you spend 1 or 2 hours of a day, you'll be able to take the exam there. Something clicked inside of her. For the first time in her life, she was in charge of her own goals. This young lady who came to me at 15 years old, 2 years behind this arbitrary artificial measurement, graduated high school and completed those exams at 17 years old, a full year before the rest of her friends. She went on to get multiple degrees and even became a teacher. She came back to me and thanked me for everything I did, but I told her I didn't do anything. You did that. The only thing that happened is that we removed the comparisons that were out of her control and gave her back the one thing that she could control. And you see, adults, we realize this is absurd. A 15-year-old girl that had been made to believe that life was over for her because she was behind. How many other adults internalize those judgments when they're older? How many adults do you know that are afraid to leave their community or their country? They're even afraid to go to a different style of restaurant because what happens if the waiter asks them a question and they don't know how to answer it? For those of us who did reject that, who didn't internalize it, we don't accept that form of education in our own adult lives. If we want to get more fit and we go to the gym, our personal trainer does not look at us and say, a 45-year-old should be able to lift this much weight. If we go to a cooking class because we want to get new skills, we do not expect there to be a quiz at the end of the class that tells us if we learned more than the person beside us. We had a moment, all of us, to fix this. In 2020, the whole world did something at the same time. They all left the classroom for different amounts of time, but for everyone, a significant amount. We could have done something to fix this problem. And when the kids came back to the classroom, we could have chosen to meet them right where they were. But we didn't do that. We didn't do anything like that at all. In fact, we told our teachers, you're going to have to catch those kids up. Take these computers that we gave you and teach faster and teach better and teach harder. But that's not possible, right? We know it's not possible. You can't just put a screen in a classroom and assume that's going to solve the problem. You have to actually shift the entire culture itself. And believe it or not, to shift the culture, we all have to take a look at what it really means to be educated. We have to really think about all of the stress and the pressure that we placed on ourselves to meet these arbitrary, artificial measurements. How much time did we take to try to make sure that we met the mark? And how much time did we as teachers put in stressing out our kids or even our own children to meet this arbitrary mark? You know, if we really take a look at it, we realize that it may have not just been a waste of time, but it might have actually been harmful. If you're really thinking about creating lifelong learners, take a look at how we treat our own children. It would be so much faster to tie their shoes for them if you wanted to get out of the classroom or out of the house, It would be so much faster sometimes to yell and scream at them. Then they would clean that room on time. But we don't take those short-term measures with our own children because our goal is to have a lifetime of relationships with them. We don't look at our kid and think, well, they're behind in how well they tie their shoes, or they're ahead in how well they brush their teeth. And we certainly don't allow ourselves to put pressure on the way we treat them in order to meet this measurement. You see, when we say something like someone is ahead or someone is behind, what we're actually admitting is that this is some type of a race. And if this is some type of a race, then there must be some type of a finish line. But if we're trying to create lifelong learners, we have to reject that. There is no finish line when it comes to learning. Thank you.